all, but that's as a concept, not as a book. They are like equal to my heart. But since for me everything is a place where, as a human being, you're connected with your environment, you're in harmony, there's peace, there's just a feeling that everything is the way it should be. That's a good place to be. That's how we should live, in a way. And nothing is, for me, a scary, a dark place where you are not connected with anything, where there's no meaning felt. So that's why the children in Nada, they run from this ghost of nothing. And in a way they run towards, so they're trying to find in the wrong way, but they are trying to find what I call everything. It's comes quite naturally that generally I'm preoccupied with something that I don't understand in society or how people behave, and then at some point the voice comes and I know, okay, now I have a way to approach this, and then it's a story. So it's not like I can analyze my way for it, because each story only works if the voice is strong enough, and that's like come from a place that I don't really know where. This what I call also the lake of everything, that's like the source of it. So yeah, it just somehow okay, this is a voice for this story, and then also I don't know exactly what will happen in a story once I start, but it develops while I work on it. So it's just, yeah, each story is its own, even when I kind of know what or the kind of theme that I want to work with. Like, for example, the one Yellow Light, I knew I wanted to say something about, or write a story about modern slavery, and I also knew I wanted to make it so that normal people could relate to it. So it's not a story of somebody from Africa who's been sold into slavery from they were children, because it's too far away from a normal middle class person's life. But if you make it something that happens in your environment, so then it comes close. And that's how the story came with this boy. Oh, I mean, some of the stories I've written over a long period of time, so it's not like I just said one day now I will write short stories instead of novels. It's just certain themes or certain stories. They are not huge enough for a whole novel, or at least the way I want to tell it. Because of course you can write many novels about, for example, modern slavery or multiculturality. But it's just what I wanted to say can be done in a story. I feel that there are certain issues that you can better deal with in the voice of young people. And often it's a big existential questions, because though we don't have answers to them, but still they're quite simple. The meaning of life, why are we here, where does the sky end? Even children ask these questions, what happens when we die? And the same with certain other issues. I find that if you take a young person's voice, you can go much more directly to the problem, and thereby make the story more interesting, even also for adults. So I think the one, for example, with the Turkish blanket or carpet, the girl is, I think, only around 11. And exactly because she's that age, and you see the story through her eyes, and in a way, as a reader, you understand more what goes on than she understands. But it just makes, I don't know, I think you see better the full picture. And then, of course, there are other subjects that you have to deal with through adult eyes, because they demand more experience. That's like in my book Ven, or some of my other literature that are just for adults. And I think one of the stories here is through the eyes of an adult. The one I don't know what it's called in Spanish, with the hips moving, and that's a bit about freedom of expression and how we treat other people. And I also felt that demanded more experience in the person that was the main character. But as readers, you don't necessarily need to have that experience. Yes, I think there are many levels in that. For one, I think to write good fiction, you have to let your fiction be more important than your real life when you write it. And if you think that through, it's a really crazy thing to do. We have only one life, and why sit and write about life if you could go out and live it? And the other is, in a way, to invent stories is a very crazy thing. Instead of being in real life. So there's a level of abstraction from reality in it that's a little bit crazy also. And then also, in general, to accept the lifestyle. To write, again, a novel particularly because it takes a long time, you have to stay in a certain voice, and you have to feel all these characters, as I said, to make the feelings of your fictive characters more important than people in your own life. I think it's a choice that is crazy and one wouldn't take if you were totally normal. Well, that was kind of probably one of those crazy things, because it wasn't really a decision, it was more the other way. Since I was a little child, I was always writing stories, and I wanted to be a writer, but in Denmark I come from an immigrant family. My mother came with the Red Cross to Denmark as a child when she was 12 years old, just after the Second World War. And on my father's side, his father had been a German soldier in the First World War, and after the war didn't want to be German anymore and walked to Denmark. So for my family, as typical immigrants, they wanted us children to have educations and do something we could make a living on. An artist is not what is considered something you do. And then also I was interested in the world, so I studied macroeconomics. But all the time I was always writing stories. And I published my first short story in a newspaper in Denmark when I was 14. And I think I started my first novel when I was 12. I didn't get so far, but and I have many manuscripts in my drawers that nobody shall ever see. But it was I just always knew this I would do. So I was writing at night while I was studying, because I also had jobs next to it. And in my first jobs for United Nations and European Union, I would write in the night. And then it was finally, when I was 30, I had paid out my debts from studying, and I'd saved up some money. So it was like I was ready to say, okay, it's now or never. And then I left everything to write. But in that sense, it was more like, it was not a decision suddenly to, now I want to leave to write. It was more that I went a very roundabout way to get to the writing. I mean, on the one hand, it was more difficult than I thought, because I think I didn't expect that the discipline of writing fiction is so different than the discipline of going to work. I was used to working very many hours in the kind of jobs I had for United Nations, but then all the time somebody expects something from you that you have to deliver, and you are in a social context, and so it gives immediate sense what you do. When you write a big novel that might take you 3 or 4 years to write, and then another year to be published, then you don't see this immediacy. So in that sense, you can always say, oh, I'll write tomorrow instead of today. But then you'll never get to the novel. So that was one thing that I had to learn that was very different. And another thing is actually the loneliness of the writing process itself. Maybe some writers can, but I can't share what I write while I write it. But it means that everything you're preoccupied with, you are not sharing with anyone for all this period of time. Only in a way you share it with others when you're no longer so preoccupied with it, because you're working on another book when that last book gets published. So some of all these processes were a surprise to me. But the basic thing of writing I still love as much as I always did. And I've also had to learn to talk to readers about the writing. I was not very public as a person, when this started. I was very shy. So it took me a while to learn to just say, hey, take it in the way that people basically just want you to be honest about your books, and they're interested in it. So it's actually nice. But in the beginning, I was just so shy about it.